Hello, my name is Owen, and welcome to a quick review of Ashley Flowers' All Good People Here. What I want to do is give a brief overview of the book's about, tell you things I liked, and tell you things that I didn't like. This was a unique reading experience for me, in more ways than one. First of all, I'm not a big reader of the crime, thriller, mystery genre that this book is. I know the author is quite famous. Ashley Flowers is the host of the Crime Junkies podcast, which is maybe something you listen to. I've never listened to it, certainly not why I picked the book up, but it's her debut novel, debut fiction novel into this crime genre, which is very interesting. So I'm sure fans of her true crime podcast, it's certainly a reason for them to check out the book. But I picked it up because Barnes & Noble, it was their, thriller book of the month, or however they promote books these days, for January of 2024. And I was in this Barnes & Noble. It was a new one. It was a very nice store. I had a gift card from the holiday season, and I got an email about this book. I'm like, it sounds interesting enough. I'll check it out. I found it. I was on one of their many stacks of books that are endless and towards the front to entice you in some way or another. And certainly I was enticed. So I grabbed the book, and it was like a buy one, get one half off for the paperbacks or whatever. So I'm like, oh, sweet. I'll get 2 books then. So I grabbed this book, and I grabbed one I wasn't really that interested in reading, but it was there, wasn't it? So I grabbed it, and I decided to sit in their little common area, like the fake Starbucks brand, where they pretend to be a Starbucks by having the Starbucks logo, but are they really a Starbucks? Because they won't accept your gift cards. What's up with that? But I sat down in their lounge area, and I finished the book in one sitting entirely. And then, because I didn't buy it, I just put it back. And I got another book instead. And I put the book I didn't want to read back, because I certainly didn't want to read it, having not reading the book, bought the book that I wanted to buy in the first place. I just bought a different book entirely. But don't worry, Barnes & Noble, before the police come after me again and dig their meaty Barnes & Noble fingers into my plump flesh. Don't worry about it. I bought one of your overpriced $29 hardbook covers of your book that I didn't even really want to read in the first place, but it was even more promoted than the last. It was their book of the month. So we'll see how that goes for me. So don't worry about that. You got my money, and I got a snack at the Starbucks, which is not really a Starbucks. It's a Barnes & Noble Starbucks. But you don't have the audacity to call yourself a Barnes & Noble cafe. Anyway, the book. The book follows our main character, a reporter by the name of Margot. She's going back to her old hometown in Indiana, small town vibes. Everybody knows everything about each other and they gossip a lot, that kind of vibe. Back when she was a child, there was an abduction of a girl named January Jones, and she was abducted and murdered. And then in the present day, when she goes back to this town, a case similar has emerged, and she's staying with her uncle who has dementia, and she's trying to also report on this case, and is there a connection to the past? And this book is interesting. It takes place over 2 timelines. The first one following the original crime, mostly following the mother of January Jones, and then in the present day with Margot, trying to find the connection between the 2 cases. Having not read a lot of the mystery genre, the thriller genre, I thought this book was an extremely fun read. You can tell that Flowers has a grasp of crimes and what makes them suspenseful and what makes them interesting. Because for a debut author, it was very, very solid on the writing front. I had no issues with that, but also in terms of just planting the mystery hooks in you, right? Because I feel like it's a little bit harder. Like shows can do it because they got their music and they got their famous actors on the screen, but sometimes it's harder for me to buy into what's going on type things in books, and that's kind of why I feel like I stay away from the mystery genre, because I feel like an entire book dedicated to the what's going on would be less interesting to me. But maybe it's a genre I got to explore more heavily, because certainly I was engaged in this story. Are the characters the most 3D you've ever seen? Not necessarily, and I do think just starting with the main things that I don't like, and there aren't that many. It's the characters are really in service of the plot, as you'd expect from a crime thriller mystery novel. It's a very plot-driven book. It's about the crime. It's about the whodunit aspect. I do think that Flowers has an interesting thing with the dual timelines here, especially with setting up the preconceived notions of what the town thinks of this mother from the original crime, and being able to see her like step by step. It's like, are we fighting the preconceived notions or are we falling into them? It's kind of like unreliable narrator-esque feeling, because like you're getting the perspective of these characters from the past, from the future, and also in their past it's not all exactly how they present themselves, if that makes sense, without getting into too much spoilers. But basically, a minor spoiler, in the future, the mother of this abducted and murdered girl is not very well liked. So it's kind of like exploring her POV and some of her flaws in that way, which I thought was very interesting. But it's not a character piece. While there are some good character moments, especially with that character of the mother in the past. Margot's your stereotypical kind of like reporter character, loves her work, but it's kind of like, and there's like a almost a romance plot, but it doesn't really go that far. Really, it's just these characters are here to be suspects, or they're here to just move the plot along in a reveal type of way. Which for this type of book, it's a shorter book, 300 pages. I was perfectly fine with that. Not everything has to be a character piece. That being said, the one concept I think that Flowers could have explored a little bit more of like the promise of the premise, was that it comes in the title. I feel like the theme in the title of All Good People Here, it refers to the small towns. Like, nothing bad could happen in our town. Like that kind of mantra that people say when something horrible happens in a small town, because everybody knows everybody, and they think, or they like to think, that they know everybody's character as well. So when this story first starts, Margot's like interviewing people from the town, and there's kind of like this atmosphere of like, when she does something, the entire town knows about it. And it's almost kind of like ominous and threatening. It's like the feeling, and a lot of different fictional stories have done this, where it's like the small town turns against somebody, and how scary, how like kind of like suffocating that could feel. And there's some moments where I thought she was going to hit on that a little bit stronger, but especially as like the mystery progresses and we get more suspects that come to the forefront or are ruled out, the whole kind of small town aspect kind of fades away. And I wish more of that All Good People Here would never happen in our town stuff would have carried through and maybe affected more characters' actions, because I think that's an interesting dynamic to play with, rather than just like finding the specific murderer. But that being said, while I wish that could have been more explored, and because it's the title, I thought it would be more important. I think that how the mystery develops, I had my suspicions of who had done it, and who ended up being, I did think of, but they weren't like my primary suspect. I'm like, oh, it could be them, but like never thought about it again. So I think in that sense, this is a weird baseline, because like I said, I don't really read a lot of good mystery or watch a lot of mystery stuff, but Only Murders in the Building, that show on Hulu, it's kind of structured similar to that, if you've seen that, where it's like, they'll have specific episodes where it's like, this is the person that did it. And then you look at the episode listings, like episode 4 of 8. So you're like, okay, well, it's the 4th episode. It definitely wasn't you. It's kind of like that. So there's a moment where it's like, I really thought it was a specific person. And then our main character caught on to them. And I'm like, look how many pages are left. I'm like, 70 pages left? I don't think it's them. So it's kind of ruined in that aspect. I feel like it's hard for books to keep up suspense when you know how much longer of the book it is. But overall, I was happy with how the twists laid up. That being said, I think that this ending will be controversial for people. The reviews I have read, people have hated how this book ended, because it's not what you expected. Maybe not in terms of like the mystery, but how the climax resolves itself is a choice. And I don't want to spoil it, because it really is, it spoils not only who did it, but just like how it happens at the end. It reminds me of more of like a horror movie type ending, without getting any more specific than that. If you've seen a lot of horror movies, you can guess what I'm talking about in terms of like shock value and what may happen like that. But some people may find the specific ending unsatisfying, because it's kind of a cliffhanger. Not everything is resolved in a tight, neat bow. So you might not enjoy that as much. So I thought it was interesting. I thought it was an interesting way to end it. I don't know if this is something like she wants to explore this town in future books and stuff like that, and like more of the characters in this world. It didn't feel like it to me. I wasn't really felt wanting more. However, like I said, I read it in one sitting, so it gripped me. I was invested. I wanted to see who had done it. I was fine with who did it at the end, which I feel like for this type of genre, at least for someone who isn't super into it, that's all I wanted out of it. So if you want to check it out, and you can get it for a good price, or you can read it in one sitting without buying it, I do recommend that you do so. I think I'm kind of doing a running experiment here of can Barnes & Noble be trusted? And I think on this part, I think it was an enjoyable read. I'm sure they are very happy that Flowers has a very successful podcast that they could help boost sales with. But overall, I was not disappointed with the book. And had I have bought it, I would not have been disappointed with that money that I would have allocated towards it. So that's all I got. If you read the book, let me know in the comments what you thought of it, or if you like the crime, thriller, mystery genre. And if you don't, what's holding you back? Because I'm sure it's the same thing I was thinking to myself, but it's good to explore different things and explore different ways to read, like sitting in a Barnes & Noble fake Starbucks and reading it all in one sitting. Another experience to add to the binder of the world, am I right? Be sure to like and subscribe if you like the video and you want to see more like it in the future. And as always, thanks for sticking around.